Hey folks, Nathan P. Butler here. Welcome to the next in our series of content overviews for the Tiny Epic games from Gamelin Games. This one is Tiny Epic Mechs. So what we're going to be looking at here is the playmat for Tiny Epic Mechs that you can see underneath. We will eventually see this from higher up with everything on it. The official storage box, the game itself, of course, in its regular and deluxe forms, and some promo cards for Tiny Epic Mechs from Man vs. Meeple. This one marks an interesting point for me in my collecting of the Tiny Epic series, because this was the last one that had already been fulfilled before I got into Tiny Epic. I got into Tiny Epic thanks to Ultra Tiny Epic Galaxies, and when I got into it, I got big into it, started picking up all the previous games, and then I wound up late pledging Tiny Epic Tactics, the next game in the series that hadn't fulfilled yet. But this was the most recent as of the time that I got into it. I won't say it's one of my favorite Tiny Epics, but it is an interesting little Tiny Epic. So let's check it out. So Tiny Epic Mechs was funded in 2018 with a goal of $15,000. It funded at a level of $545,531. There are multiple pledge levels as usual. You could get a PNP version for $8, a retail version for $20, a deluxe version for $25, and we will look at the deluxe content here. 2 copies of the deluxe version for $46, 10 copies of the deluxe version for $200, or an honorary producer pledge for $250. This, of course, is the box, Tiny Epic Mechs, Gamelin Games, a futuristic arena game by Scott Almes. Then we have Gamelin, players 1 to 4. The fact that it is 1 to 4 was actually a stretch goal. It was originally going to be 2 to 4. But then the $100,000 stretch goal, they added solo rules. Time, 30 to 40 minutes, ages 14 plus, Tiny Epic Mechs. Then you have your vertical side here, Tiny Epic Mechs, Gamelin Games. We'll see the back in a second. Your horizontal side, Tiny Epic Mechs, no company logo here. The other side, similar information. And then the back, which has that same information here, the logo again, content listing, and we're going to see all that. Sleeve information, at least on my copy. Gamelin Games, QR code, UPC, some of the components shown. The fact that it does have item meeples. We've seen item meeples before in Tiny Epic Quest. We've seen them in Tiny Epic Defenders 2nd Edition and the Dark War. We see them in Tiny Epic Zombies. So far, this is the last time we will see item meeples in a Tiny Epic game. We would eventually see some games get little tiny ships and little tiny miniatures, but not item meeples again, at least not as of October of 2025 when I'm recording this. So what does it say about itself, aside from the credits and website and legalese and all here? In Tiny Epic Mechs, players take on the roles of highly skilled and athletic mech pilots. They compete in a free-for-all battle royale over the span of 6 rounds. In each round, players program their actions and execute them in order. These actions keep you moving around the arena while allowing you to deploy defensive turrets or explosive mines, collect resources, purchase weaponry, power up into your power armor, and eventually take control of the mighty mech. Then, of course, the things that make Tiny Epic tiny and epic, we have easy entry, high strategy, low downtime, short playtime, high replayability, and small box. Speaking of the box, it was upgraded as stretch goals to 2mm thickness at $30,000 and to have spot UV and interior printing at the $45,000 mark. So let's look at that interior. The interior of the top is this artwork here. The interior of the bottom is an FAQ. So if you are going to put this into the storage box, you're going to want to make sure that you don't lose the FAQ. Scan it, cut it out, whatever. If you're curious around the edges here, at least of my copy, it advertises Tiny Epic Quest on one side, Zombies, and Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea, and Defenders. So, of course, you have your rule book here, the rules of the arena, which lays everything out. I would note that when you are playing solo, this is basically true solo. You are actually playing as just you as a human player, but in solo mode, it is essentially a 3-player game. This can be played 2, 3, or 4 players. If you are playing it solo, it is you versus 2 automated opponents in what is basically a 3-player mode or a 3-player map mode. The map layouts do differ depending on the number of players, as we will see. So when you're playing the game, you're going to be running around a map made up of zone cards. Again, the configuration being dependent upon how many players there are. And basically you're running around in, your regular, human armor with your human weapons, and then your power armor, which is kind of meching up a little bit, where you've got regular weapons and you've got these powerful weapons, and then you've got the mighty mech, which only one person can have at a time, and it's basically all the better weapons. They call them basic and advanced weapons. Basic that humans and power armor humans can use, and then advanced that power armor and Mighty Mech can use. But you're running around trying to knock each other out to win points. It is important here to note that this is not a player elimination kind of game if you're worried about that. Basically, when you get knocked out, things just reset and you go back into play. It may give another player a scoring advantage, but it's not like it knocks you out of the game. This isn't Mortal freaking Kombat. In any event, you're running around on a map made of zones. There are 21 total zone cards. Most of them, these sort of randomized ones, have this back on them. But basically you'll notice that they have essentially two components. There's numbers and there's symbols. Numbers on two of the corners, symbols in the center. The symbols are for when you do the collect resources action. If you have control of a zone, which means that your meeple is there or one of your turrets or mines is there, then you are able to collect one of whatever resource is there, either credits or energy. The numbers have multiple purposes. If you are in a zone and you want to deploy a mine, then you pay credits based on the number of that zone. So 1 credit here, 2, 3, and so on. And if an enemy enters the space with your mine, we'll see in a little bit that the mines have numbers on them. And the damage the mine deals is equal to the zone's number, 1, 2, or 3, plus the number on the mine itself. On the other hand, if you've got yourself some energy to spend, you can deploy a turret instead. Turrets deal just the damage of the number of that zone and cost the number in energy to play. So 2 different types of bad news you can leave behind in a zone when you're moving along, with the cost of each dependent on the number but in different currencies, and the damage from each also dependent on the number but in different ways. For what it's worth, there are 3 energy number 1s, 3 credit number 1s, 3 each of the number 2s, 1 for energy, 1 for credit as well, and then 2 copies each of the 3 credit and 3 energy ones. Again, 3 and 2 and all that stuff, credit, energy, they are separate things. It's not giving you, for example, if you're here, 2 credits, the 2 has the purpose I described, the symbol has the purpose I described, never the twain shall meet, so to speak. Then you've got the Mighty Mech that'll be in the center. This is where the Mighty Mech armor will go for the meeples, as we will see, but it plays otherwise like any other. If the Mighty Mech is there, that's a way to pick it up. We'll look at that in a little bit. And then each player has a starting space in their color. They all have a value of 2. They all can collect both types of resources. They are all just double-sided because they don't get randomized. To help you remember they don't get randomized, same thing with the Mighty Mechs zone there. I would note, by the way, that all of the cards, as usual, got some stretch goal upgrades. They became 310 GSM, Ivory Core, Linen Finish, and got rounded corners all at the $60,000 stretch goal. As a player, you're going to have several different types of cards to use. One type is your actual pilot card that represents you as a character, essentially. So each has sort of a little portrait here of the regular human version of the character. It says pilot, name up at the top. There'll be a special ability that is different for each character. There are essentially hand slots here, places for basic weapons on either side, so your regular pilot can only use basic weapons, and only 2 at a time, which makes sense because you're a human, you got 2 hands. And there's a health track at the bottom, and if you get to the end of the track, you are KO'd, but then you will respawn with a minimum of 2 credits and 2 energy. We'll see where the credits and energy are tracked later on. Essentially, if you have more than 2 of either one, you just keep however much you've got. But if you've got less than 2 of either one, that one does go up to 2. So you're respawning, and you're not completely screwed, just somewhat screwed. So we have Maverick, Tank, Kitty, and Magma. These are the ones that were initially intended for the game before any stretch goals or deluxe content, or promos, as we will see. And each one, on the reverse side, has their power armor version. We will see how that is represented on the item meeples in a bit, but power armor is something you can do with a power-up ability. Basically, when you have your power-up ability active, which we will see how to do in a moment, you can spend 5 credits to become your power armor self. That brings you back to full health, and now your health track, instead of starting at 6, starts at 9. If, however, you get KO'd, you retreat and you lose the power armor. But notice here that on the power armor side, you can hold your 2 basic weapons just like on your human side, but you also get to hold your advanced weapons. So there are the power armor sides of our original 4 characters. Then there were 4 characters added as stretch goals. Again, different abilities, functionally the same otherwise. These were Rampage at $200,000, Tsunami at $270,000, Wasp at $340,000, and Diamond at $410,000. And there's their power armor sides. There will be some other pilots for us to see, but those are going to be held for our deluxe section and the promo card section. You'll find those near the end. If you reach the space holding the Mighty Mech and you are in your power armor and you are at full health, you can immediately take control of the Mighty Mech if no one else is already in it. There's 2 different versions of the Mighty Mech. Notice here the health is now at 11. However, the Mighty Mech cannot heal or repair at all, so it's a finite resource here. You can't boost it back up. It says down here, Mighty Mech cannot heal. Notice it has 4 weapon slots just like power armor, but they're all advanced. You can't use any basic weapons here. When you get into the Mighty Mech, you immediately score 2 points, and there are 2 different versions. There's Troy 3000, and there's Sparta 3000, each of which has a different ability on it. And I would note here, if you do acquire the Mighty Mech, you get to choose which side to put it on for when you are using it. It can change between player possessions. Making it double-sided, though, was actually a stretch goal at 2,000 Board Game Geek fans. Each player is also going to have a player card that keeps track of their credits and their energy, both of which start at 3 at the beginning of the game, and has a whole bunch of extra information to help you out here. So, for example, it tells you about deploying. Again, if you want to deploy a turret, then it's going to cost you energy equal to the value of the space, or credits for a mine. After any combat, that's when the turret will go off, again attacking for just the value of the space. If it dealt a KO, by the way, you do score 1. And then a mine, before any combat, will go off, and again, it is the value of the space and the number on the mine. It also gives you 1 point if dealing a KO. You have some reminders here about what you can do with Power Up, where you can spend 1 energy to heal 2. We'll see where you get these actions from in a moment. Or with Power Up, you can upgrade, again, paying 5 credits to get into your power armor. The Mighty Mech, remember, you have to be in full health to get into the Mighty Mech. Combat, which we haven't looked at yet, you get 1 point for starting combat, 1 point for every damage you deal to the enemy, and 1 point for causing the enemy to retreat or dealing a KO. And then there is a sort of rock, paper, scissors thing going on here with combat. We'll talk more about combat when we look at the weapons. Just know that there is melee, area, and ranged attacks. There is a sort of rock, paper, scissors kind of thing going on here when it comes to the ability to counter. And then all of these cards have a reference on the back in case you are playing solo. Voila! And these will show you what the solo bot will do. It talks about how the movement will work specifically in terms of the direction that it's facing, the direction it's going, how it's going to target, where it's going to move, and then what happens in terms of movement and any additional rules for whatever action comes up for them, because they'll be randomly drawing cards for actions rather than programming them, as we will see. So all that is laid out relatively straightforward here. I did have some questions myself. I did go to BGG and ask some of them, but for the most part, between the rulebook and these, it's relatively clear how the solo bot is going to play. Or I should say bots, because again, you will always play against 2 of them. So in other words, you'll have 1 of these on the player side for you, 2 of these on the player side for your enemies, and 1 that'll stay on this side as a reference. You're making use of all 4. You will also be keeping track of score on here, starting with 1. I do find it frustrating. This is yet another of these score tracks that snakes around as it goes, which is kind of frustrating. But it is identical on either side. You're also going to keep track of your rounds. Again, it plays over 6 rounds, so it's sort of a limited time thing. The games can't last terribly long because they're designed to end after 6 rounds, which is nice. And then at the end of rounds 2, 4, and 6, that's when scoring happens, outside of just things you might do to score during the regular course of a round. And scoring is laid out here on the bottom. So basically the way this works is that first off, mines and turrets can never be in the same space. So there'll only be 1 mine or turret in any given space. That's yours, that's anybody's. So if I've got a mine in a space, another player can't put a mine or a turret in that space. Of course, the mine's going to blow up in their face when they go there, but that's beside the point. So you're going to look at any space that has one of your mines in it. You're going to score the value of that space. Again, the 1, 2, or 3 that's on it. Turrets will also score based on the number of the space, but they get double the point. So if it's a 3, they get 6, a 2, they get 4, and so on. Wherever you are, you score for that space. You score whatever the value is, so 1, 2, or 3. And if you have the Mighty Mech at the time, you score just a flat 3. So 2 when you get into it, 3 if you've got it during a scoring phase. And this also is simply double-sided. And that makes this a good time to start talking about tokens really fast here as we're wrapping up the large cards. So this is your first player token, says admit 1, single-sided here. This is your round token, MECH, mech, and blank on the back. That, by the way, stands for Mechanized Entertainment Combat Heroes. Then each player gets a health marker here, again, single-sided but screen printed and shaped. Then no symbol or anything, a teeny tiny lightning bolt type symbol there for energy. Your credits symbol there. And then a score tracker that if you ever make it all the way up to the top to 40, again, I keep thinking 33, but no, it loops around, which pisses me off. You flip it, now you have a plus 40, and now, for example, here you would be on 42. The energy and credit tokens became these shaped wooden tokens at $125,000. The health and score, or victory, I guess they call it, tokens became the screen-printed shaped wooden tokens at $150,000. And the first player and round tokens became those shaped screen-printed wooden tokens at $175,000. Then you have your individualized components by color. You have your program cards and your ad hoc mode cards, which we'll look at here in just a moment. And then everybody gets an item meeple. And the item meeples also get their own power armor. And the idea of the power armor actually being in the player colors was an upgrade at $510,000. We then have shaped tokens for your mines and turrets. The fact that they are these shaped wooden tokens was the $75,000 stretch goal. Notice on mines, again, the mines actually have numbers that are kept hidden whenever they are placed out on the board, because when one of these goes off, the damage is equal to the number of the zone plus what's on the mine. So you can kind of control that a little bit. And then you have your turrets, which are just these kind of weird, I don't even know what you call them. It's like somebody took a plus and stretched it or something, like the loading was bad or whatever. But those are your turrets, which again, don't need a number because they just deal the damage equal to the number of the zone. And then up here, you've got your Mighty Mech. So the idea, if I can use, purple here, is that when you do the upgrade action, you're using a power-up action to do an upgrade. You're going to place your little meeple inside your power armor. You're going to put your weapons in the slots, as we'll see in a little bit. And then when the time comes to actually become the Mighty Mech, you have to be at full health and in your power armor. You're going to take yourself out of here. So we'll just use the gray one as an example. It slides in on the prongs. Carefully, carefully, carefully. Don't push it too hard. It doesn't go all the way in. Then this connects on top, going into its original holes here. And there you are inside the Mighty Mech that'll have weapons on the shoulders and or arms. Only one of these. You're kind of fighting over it. So before we look at the weapons and all the cool stuff that does with the item meeples, let's look at those programming cards and the ad hoc mode card. We'll set that aside for now. So you have these cards that let you program what you're going to do. This is kind of where I struggle with the game because I'm just not someone who thinks ahead that far. I'm not really a good chess player, for example. They all say program on the back except ad hoc mode, which has the same thing on both sides. And the idea is that as you're playing the game, at the beginning of a round, you're going to lay out 4 cards. And it's not really 4, it's more like 8, because you're laying out one where the direction makes a difference. But when you lay it out, you're putting one of your unused ones on top of it, so no one else can see what you're planning to do. And then on each player's turn, as it goes around and around and around, you're going to execute one of your programmed actions, which basically means you're going to remove this to reveal it, still facing the direction that you laid it down, because it makes a difference in terms of how you're going to move on the map. And there's different options of what can happen. Usually there's some kind of movement and an action. unless you're doing some specific types of movement. So let's look at those. So again, the direction is going to face whichever 90-degree direction you're trying to go here for the most part, except for this one here. So don't pay attention to the fact they're all facing forward. They could be facing right, left, whatever, it doesn't matter. But when you do your movement, you go into that zone and you can do whatever the action is. The action is voluntary, so you could choose not to do it. You could just choose to use the direction to move. But this is how you would deploy a turret, deploy a mine, purchase, which is how you purchase new weapons. We'll see weapons here in a moment. How you power up, again, to either heal or purchase your power armor. To collect resources, and there's actually 2 of these. So there's 2 that let you collect because you're going to be using that resource collection quite a bit because you're going to be spending the resources quite a bit. And then you have a couple of special types of movement here that instead of moving one space in the direction, you can either do a diagonal jump by one space or a double jump that basically jumps over a space, avoids any mines or turrets or whatever there, and lands in the next space. So like from here to here, if we're looking at the play mat there. And in both of these cases, notice there's this little symbol here, the same symbol we saw under the counter symbol when we looked at that rock, paper, scissors thing. That indicates a power attack. All your weapons have 2 attacks. Doing this initiates a power attack, as we'll see on those cards. This ad hoc mode card here is just in case you get KO'd or you have to retreat. Basically, in a round, you're gonna do the 4 things that you chose at the beginning, regardless of how the game state is changing. You might change your mind about what you're gonna wind up doing as far as, whether you do the action or not, but those cards are there in the order you laid them down, pointing the directions you laid them down. You must think ahead. But if you were to get knocked out or have to retreat, you're going to collect all your cards. You're going to have your ad hoc mode laid out. Your ability to attack is going to be disabled for 1 turn, but for any subsequent turns during that round, you can just play whatever card you want in whatever direction you want. You now get to choose on the fly rather than going by your program, because the program got your butt killed or knocked out. So let's start now talking about combat and weapons. So we have basic weapons here. I'm only showing you 1 copy of each, but every character has their own copy of energy sword, pulse pistol, riot shield, and grenade launcher. And this, of course, uses item meeples, so we have the little plastic weapons here that'll go onto the item meeples. So again, every player has a little miniature weapon to go with it. At the beginning of the game, as a human player, you're given 1 of each of the weapon types. You choose 1 to keep, and the other ones basically go into the market. You can always purchase the other types, but you only start with 1. If you're playing solo, then you still start with just 1, but the enemy AI, one of them will start with a pulse pistol and an energy sword, the other will start with a pulse pistol and a grenade launcher. So all the weapons do have a score up in the top right, a victory point amount in the top right. I'm going to say, what the heck is that for? At the end of the game, after you do the regular end of round scoring for each of those rounds, including round 6, the other thing you do to add to your final score at the end of the game is the victory points on all the weapons you've acquired in your stockpile. So you do want to buy those because they can help you not just to attack, but also to be prepared for final victory, hopefully. They each have some type of cost to them. So some of them cost credits, some of them cost energy, some of them cost both. You also notice that each one under their name has 2 different effects. The first effect is your regular attack. The second is your power attack. And each one has a value of how much damage it does. Notice here for grenade launcher, for energy sword, and for pulse pistol, the regular ability, as I knock that little mini out of the way, the regular ability deals 1 damage, but the power deals 2, whereas the riot shield, the power attack does 2, but the regular does no damage at all. Instead, you got an effect there, right? Some of them have effects. In this case, that 0 is to heal 1 health for each energy you pay to a maximum of 3. So the riot shield is another healing ability in the middle of a fight. The grenade launcher and energy sword have no special effects for their regular ability. For power, pulse pistol doesn't have any extra effect, but they all have some extra effects for the other stuff here. The idea here is that when you move into a zone with another player, with another character, you are initiating combat. You score 1 point for being the one to initiate the combat. Then you, as the attacker, get to deal damage, and you're going to use your regular first line ability unless you were going into that space using one of those jump abilities that have that power symbol on it, that power attack symbol. In that case, you would do the power attack listed on the bottom. And you're going to score points for the amount of damage that you do. But then the other player, assuming that they're not knocked out, are going to be able to attack back. Normally, they're just going to attack with their first line value. However, again, remember that rock, paper, scissors thing. An area attack will counter ranged, ranged will counter melee, melee will counter area. So maybe an attack that's coming in was with the energy sword using melee here, and it was that initial attack for 1. If the person then counterattacking uses the pulse pistol, which is ranged, again, ranged counters melee, they get to use the power attack. So they get to attack back for their power attack ability of 2 damage here rather than 1 with the effect. You might expect this to go on and on and on, but it won't, because every time you attack with a weapon, you must exhaust the weapon. And you can only use the weapons that are equipped. You can switch which ones are equipped versus in your stockpile at the beginning of your turn, when you purchase a new weapon, or when you change your status, like if you're going up to power armor or going back down or whatever. So with a fully equipped human, it's basically a maximum of 2 attacks on each side because you can only carry 2 basic weapons. If you have exhausted all of your weapons, then the next time that you act, you have to retreat. That means you go to the next orthogonally adjacent friendly zone, or at least non-hostile zone, and your opponent who forced you to retreat scores 1 victory point. On the other hand, if you got KO'd instead, they still score a victory point for KOing you. If you're in your pilot mode, you go back to full health. As I mentioned before, if you're at less than 2 energy or 2 credits, you go to 2 of whichever one you were low on. Then you go back to your base, or the nearest possible orthogonal space that isn't hostile. If you're in your power armor, then you lose the power armor, go back to full health, and then move away to the nearest orthogonal zone. You were knocked out of your power armor, not knocked out physically. If you're in the Mighty Mech, you get knocked out, and you get knocked down to your pilot status, not to your power armor. And you're still in the closest orthogonal safe zone. But more importantly, if you're knocked out in the Mighty Mech, then the other player, regardless of their health level, regardless of if they're in their power armor, they immediately get to take the Mighty Mech at full health. So those are weapons, but they're just basic weapons. Let's look at advanced. Advanced weapons also need to be purchased. You don't start with any of these, but you can use that purchase a weapon action to buy one from the market. There's typically 4 available at any given time, starting at the beginning of the game and then replenishing when any are purchased. And of course, each one has its own little tiny meeple weapon as well, which we'll look at here in a moment. That one just does not want to stay face down. But for ranged, you have the Gauss rifle, the laser blaster, the Gatling gun, and the rail gun. Again, this is before any stretch goals. For area, you have auto turret, plasma cannon, rocket battery, lightning coil, particle phaser, and flamethrower. And for melee, it's just 2, the Warhammer and the shock knuckles. Notice they all have the same kind of stuff on them, right? The type, the basic attack, or at least the first attack, the power attack. You got your victory point amount at the end of the game, and you've got your cost in either energy or credits or both. But these are advanced, so they can only be equipped by someone wearing power armor or the Mighty Mech. And again, the Mighty Mech can only equip advanced. So you'll buy these and stockpile them if you're a pilot to use later when you're in your power armor or in the mech. Then we have 4 weapons added to the game by stretch goals. And again, we're still looking at basic content here. We've seen nothing for Deluxe, and there are no new weapons in Deluxe or anything. So if you got the base game, you got all the weapons, of course. So we have 2 new ranged ones here, the crossbolt and the sniper rifle. You know, everybody has their little miniatures here. And then 2 new that are melee, the Vorpal Spiker and the EMP mace. That brings a total of ranged to 6 to match the 6 we have for area, but it still only leaves us 4 that are melee. These were unlocked going left to right at the $235,000, $305,000, $375,000, and $445,000 stretch goals. Let's look at how these all would look on the meeples. So here we go. Here's our pilot in pilot mode, who can only hold basic weapons. So he has his shield and his grenade launcher. This game actually doesn't use any that go on the backs, like some of the stuff we saw in Defenders. So 2 here for our pilot. Once you get in your power armor, like purple here, they have their hands and their shoulder slots, they can carry, and I just laid them out this particular way, they can carry 2 basic weapons and they can carry 2 advanced weapons, 2 of each. So they're basically able to carry 2 advanced weapons beyond what they could as a pilot. But then as soon as they jump into the Mighty Mech can have 4, 1 for each arm, 1 for each shoulder, but they are only advanced. They give you some pretty cool table presence, and I do think they're a little more functional this time than they were in some cases in the past, because this is one where you really kind of need to know what the other player has equipped because they're coming for you. And seeing that visual representation of the weapon can help remind you of what weapon they have equipped. That was always the case with the other games, but here it really does have a helpful impact on the game in a more profound way. So that was all the material from the base game. No matter what version of Tiny Epic Mechs you get all of that stuff. Stretch goals included. Now let's talk the deluxe version. The deluxe version is available through Gamelin Games directly. You might sometimes find it in a store if they happen to have backed it or gotten it in some other way, but generally it's not available at retail. Usually now, though, the little mini expansion content, the deluxe content, can be sold as a pack through Gamelin again, so you can acquire it that way. As far as deluxe content, this one actually is a little bit unusual. Usually, we have a little mini expansion, or we have some content that's essentially more of the same, and here it's a little bit of both. In terms of more of the same, we have 2 new pilots for deluxe. We have Lotus and Ghost, who again work exactly like the others, so they have different abilities, but otherwise have their same health, and they got their power armor side, and all that good stuff. Then we have 2 little mini expansions. At 15,000 Board Game Geek fans, the Loot Box mini expansion was added to the deluxe content here. So basically the idea is that in the scoring rounds, remember 2, 4, and 6, at the beginning of those rounds, you're going to take these loot tokens, and remember the Mighty Mech zone is the central zone. You're going to place these into the 4 spaces that are orthogonally adjacent to the Mighty Mechs zone there at the center. And the first person who moves into that zone, not already is in there. If they're already in there, they got to move out and move back in. But the first player to actually move into that zone, hence the little arrows reminding you, gets whatever the benefit is of that token. So we have this face down side to start with, revealed, here's your benefit. These can be pretty powerful. Full health takes you back to full health, even if you're in the Mighty Mech. It is the only way the Mighty Mech can ever heal. Weapon gets you a new weapon for free. Ad hoc mode lets you go into ad hoc mode and have that flexibility even if you didn't get KO'd or retreat. And power up lets you go from your regular mode into your power armor, again, for free. You don't have to spend the 5 credits. So that's pretty powerful stuff. You also have the originally planned mini expansion for the deluxe content, which is Spotlight, with these 4 little camera tokens here. This one actually does have some text on it. So it says, "Let's cameras destruction. It's prime time here at Battle Arena and the crowd is roaring. Let's see a replay of that last epic battle. Wow, what a play. Those spotlight cameras are really loving the energy of that pilot, and fans sure are going crazy. I think we may have a clear winner. Now let's go to Maxine on the sideline." So, little rule book here. This one is just a front and back. This one is a little booklet with an interior spread, the cover, and then a reference, which I think is nice, on the back. So basically, the cameras love combat. So in non-scoring rounds, 1, 3, and 5, you're going to have cameras available. The number of cameras for the number of players, because you can only ever have 1. If you win a combat during one of those regular non-scoring rounds, odd-numbered rounds, the camera gets put onto your pilot card or power armor, whatever card here. And while it's on there, you can collect 1 additional resource of your choice each time you use a collect action. On the other hand, you could cause someone to lose their camera, which will give you 1 point. What will cause them to lose it? You'll lose a camera if you retreat or are KO'd in a combat, trigger a mine, or are KO'd by a turret, though you don't lose a camera if you just take damage from a turret. And then at the end of a scoring round, not one of the oddball rounds where you can get it, but an actual scoring round, 2, 4, 6, if you still have a camera on you, you gain 3 points. So just a couple of little mini expansions to add some new mechanisms to your game and a couple of new pilots to add some variety to your game. That's the deluxe content. I would note, by the way, that the two pilots do have a star with DLX for deluxe up in the corner, so you can recognize which ones go with the deluxe content. Then there's a set of 3 promo cards that come together for this game that came from the Man vs. Meeple 2020 funding Kickstarter. They're based on, of course, the personalities of the Man vs. Meeple board game YouTube channel and such. So we have here Wayfinder, Drakenstrike, and Off-Duty Ninja. They all have a little Man vs. Meeple symbol up there in the corner. And of course, they have their own abilities, and the opposite sides have them in power armor. That finishes out the game content for Tiny Epic Mechs. So now let's take a look at the playmat and the storage box to round things out. So here we have the playmat for Tiny Epic Mechs. It's about the same size as what we saw for, say, Zombies or Western. I hope you will forgive me for any wonky angles or anything. The way that I'm recording this right now with the tripod lifting up the iPad, it's basically over my head height to be able to record this and show you even this much, even missing a little bit of the edges of the mat. So we have Tiny Epic Mechs and a place here for those basic weapons to be purchased. Then you have a place for this player to put their programming cards, right? Pilot command. You have a place over here for the advanced weapons with a stack for the advanced weapons. I don't think you can really see it, but you can see like that little corner edge. That's a little square there to put your advanced weapons deck in, and then here's your market for the advanced weapons. You can't see it, but there's pilot command down here. There is also pilot command over there and over there for your 4 players. You have a place for the Mighty Mech card. There is a Gamelin logo there in the corner that you can't see off screen, I think. Then a place for your scorecard and your round cards up there. And then here, of course, is going to be your actual play area with the Mighty Mech spot marked, and then all the spaces for your other zone cards. So let's go ahead and fill this in a little bit on the edges, and then we'll take a look at how the map gets set up. So again, leaving out the map, let's have a basic setup here for 2 players. So we have 1 player, they've put out their 4 program cards, and again, the direction that it's pointing is going to be relative to them on the map, so it is important to keep your orientation straight. And then we got our other player over here with their 4 program cards. Maybe they're waiting for their next turn. We don't have the tokens out, but there's your round card and your score card. Again, the sides don't matter because they are identical. Here's your market of the leftover basic cards. Here's your market of the advanced cards, and you do have your little deck of them over here. And then here's your Mighty Mech waiting in case anybody actually takes it. So pretty decent organization. It's all kind of geared towards everything kind of pointing towards the center because you're going to be sitting around the table. This is one where it actually matters where you sit relative to the board. So everybody's got their own side of the board at 12, 6, 3, and 9. Or north, south, east, and west, whatever. Now let's clear this off and take a look at how the map works out for the different player counts. So let me zoom this back down again for just a moment, and we'll take a look at the different configurations. So you start out always with your Mighty Mech zone there in the center. So for 2 player, you're going to go 2 spaces down and 2 spaces up. There's your 2 starting zones, your 2 bases. Then you take all the regular zones, shuffle them up, and you just randomly deal them out. So you're going to complete that column, and then coming from the left side, you'll put 1. Coming from the right side, you'll put 1 here. And then you're basically going to make a line of 4 on either side, building off of that one, right? So it's 4 on either side, but they're offset so that there's only 1 adjacent to either base. Then all that's left is you put 1 here and 1 here, so that center row is 5. That's your 2-player setup. You've got 4 regular zones remaining, and of course you've got your 2 extra bases remaining. Now let's look at a 3-player setup. So once again, we got Mighty Mech there in the center. We are going to take this and take it all the way out to 5 again. So the Mighty Mechs row again has 5 across, but then we're also going to do the same thing directly above it. So we have a row of 5 again. And now you're going to place your bases, and it's kind of like a triangle. So we have 3 bases that we need. So we have 1 here at the peak, we have 1 here in the lower left. We have one here in the lower right. And then we're going to finish out each of these rows like so. So we have basically 3 rows of 5, but the middle is the Mighty Mech, and the bottom left and right corners are bases, and the top row is just 3 with the base in the center. If you're playing solo, by the way, you will start here. The 2 AIs will start here facing you. At this point, you've got 1 base left and 2 zone cards left. Now let's look at 4, the maximum. So once again, we are back to the Mighty Mech in the center, and we are going to fill out, using the random zone cards again, fill out that entire column. And then to the right of that, we're going to start filling out another column. But when we get to the bottom, that's where we're going to put the first of the bases. And then going up the other side, 2, 3, 4. But then when we get to the top here, that's where we put our next base. So they're kind of diagonal from each other here. And you'll probably guess what's coming here based on the mat and the fact that now we'll have 4 more zone cards and 2 more bases. We're going to place a base here and a base here, and then just fill out what's left. So now we basically have our center 9 with the Mighty Mech in the center, and then sort of wings, if you want to call it that, of 3 each of which has a base in it, but with the base always being adjacent to those 2 rather than being adjacent to another base, or at least diagonally adjacent, which in this game doesn't count as adjacent, but you know what I mean. As you can imagine, this is something that really makes the playmat, to me, a no-brainer. It really helps you with the layout of the map, especially if you're playing 4 players, but even with those lower player counts or solo, it really is something that helps me conceptualize where I need to put these zone cards. However, you notice here they are so close together that using the mat kind of precludes the use of card sleeves, so your mileage will vary if that's your thing. One last thing that I would note before we move this back down is that while they are not on the map this time like they were in some previous instances, there were those glorious victories, sort of achievements, that were included in the PNP for the game, which were unlocked at the $460,000 stretch goal, finishing out our stretch goals. And of course, no Tiny Epic game is complete, except maybe Tiny Epic Game of Thrones and the first editions of Kingdoms and Defenders. Well, most Tiny Epic games aren't complete without a nice eRaptor storage box here. So this is the one for Tiny Epic Mechs. We, of course, have our acrylic top that has the artwork and then is otherwise kind of frosted or clear. Just pops off of here. This is a little bit thicker than some of the ones we've been seeing lately. Tiny Epic Mechs is a little bit thicker of a box. We'll look at the box itself once I show you what all's in it. We, of course, have the manual. We have a tray for the advanced weapons. We have a tray for the basic weapons. We have an interesting tray over here that has our zone cards, but then has space for some other pieces that are there for the Deluxe edition, the loot boxes, and those camera tokens. Although you could put other stuff in there, of course. A nice long tray for the weapons to go on the item meeples, your first player token, and your round token. A tray for all those large cards. And yes, this is designed to fit sleeved cards. They always are. And they do always have some printing around the pieces. Then we have a tray that has the cards for a player on top, and their individual mines, turrets, tracking tokens, starting weapons, and meeple all inside that same little tray. And you've got that for your black or gray player, your blue player, your purple player, and of course your orange player. And you have a separate tray here that fits your power armor for each and the Mighty Mech. Inside you have the Gameling Games logo. As usual, if you put it together the way the instructions say, you're going to have a front or bottom, however you want to describe it there, that has the logo, and the left side will as well. The back will not. The other side will not. The bottom is just black, as we've seen before. So there you have it, folks, all of the content for Tiny Epic Mechs. We've got the base game, the Deluxe version, the promo cards from Man vs. Meeple 2020, the playmat, and the official storage solution, the storage box from eRaptor here. Join us next time as we continue our look at the Tiny Epic games in these detailed content overviews when we take a look at Tiny Epic Tactics.